Let's talk about Latin America and its leaders like Jaime Roldos. Talk about him and his significance. You wrote about him in your first book, Confessions of an Economic Hitman.
Yeah, Jaime Roldos was an amazing man. After many years of military dictators in Ecuador, U.S. puppet dictators, there was a democratic election, and one man, Jaime Roldos, ran on a platform that said Ecuadorian resources ought to be used to help the Ecuadorian people, and specifically oil, which at that time was just coming in. This is in the late 70s. And I was sent to Ecuador, and I was also sent at the same time to Panama to work with Omar Torrijos to bring these men around, to corrupt them, basically, to change their minds. In the case of Jaime Roldos, he won the election by a landslide, and now he'd started to put into action his policy, his promises, and was going to tax the oil companies if they weren't willing to give much more of their profits back to the Ecuadorian people. Then he threatened to nationalize them. So I was sent down along with other economic hitmen. I played a fairly minor role in that case and a major one in Panama with Torrijos. But we were sent into these countries to get these men to change their policies, to go against their own campaign promises. And basically what you do is you tell them, look, if you play our game, I can make you and your family very wealthy. I can make sure that you get very rich. If you don't play our game, if you follow your campaign promises, you may go the way of Allende in Chile, or Arbenz in Guatemala, or Lumumba in the Congo. On and on. We can list all these presidents that we've either overthrown or assassinated because they didn't play our game. But Jaime would not come around, Jaime Roldos. He stayed uncorruptible, as did Omar Torrijos. And both of these, and from an economic hitman perspective, this is very disturbing because not only did I know I was likely to fail at my job, but I knew that if I failed, something dire was going to happen. The jackals would come in, and they would either overthrow these men or assassinate them. And in both cases, these men were assassinated. I have no doubt they died in airplane crashes 2 months apart from each other in 1981. Single plane, their own private planes crashed.
Explain more what happened with Omar Torrijos.
Well, Omar, again, was very, very stalwartly standing up to the United States, demanding that the Panama Canal should be owned by Panamanians. And I spent a lot of time with Torrijos, and I liked him very, very much as an individual. He was extremely charismatic, extremely courageous, and very nationalistic about wanting to get the best for his people, and I couldn't corrupt him. I tried everything I could possibly do to bring him around. And as I was sailing, I was also very concerned that something would happen to him. And sure enough, it was interesting that Jaime Roldos' plane crashed in May, and Torrijos got his family together and said, I'm probably next, but I'm ready to go. We've now got the canal turned over. He signed a treaty with Jimmy Carter to get the canal in Panamanian hands. He said, I've accomplished my job, and I'm ready to go now. And he had a dream about being in a plane that hit a mountain. And within 2 months after it happened to Roldos, it happened to Torrijos also.
And you met with both these men?
Yes, I met with both of them.
What were your conversations like?
Well, especially with Torrijos, I spent a lot of time with him in some formal meetings and also at cocktail parties and barbecues. He was big on things like that. And it was constantly trying to get him to come around to our side and letting him know that if he did, he and his family would get some very lucrative contracts, would become very wealthy. And, warning him, and he didn't really need much warning because he knew what would be likely to happen if he didn't. And his attitude was, I want to get done what I can in my lifetime, and then so be it. And it's been interesting, Amy, that since I wrote the book Confessions, Martha Roldos, who's Jaime's daughter, has come to the United States to meet with me, and I just spent time with her in Ecuador. She's now a member of Parliament in Ecuador, just elected. And she married Omar Torrijos' nephew. And it's really interesting to hear their stories about what was going on. She was 17 at the time. Her mother was also in the plane that her father died, and the children died in that plane. And then to hear her talk about how her husband, Omar's nephew, was in that meeting when the family was called together, and Omar said, I'm probably next, but I'm ready to go. I've done my job. I've done what I could do for my people. So I'm ready to go if that's what has to happen.
So what were your conversations at the time with other so-called economic hitmen? You became the chief consultant at Charles Mann.
Chief economist,
Chief
right?
economist.
Right. Well, when I was with other people, that we could be sitting at a table, say in the Hotel Panama, knowing that we're both here to win these guys over. But we also had our official jobs, which were to do studies on the economy to show how if the country accepted the loan, it was going to improve its gross national product. We would talk about those kinds of things. I suspect a little bit like if two CIA agents, spies get together or have a beer together, they don't really talk about what they're really doing beneath the surface, but they've got an official job too, and that's what you focus on. And in fact, the two, in my case, are very closely linked. So we were producing these economic reports that would prove to the World Bank and would prove to Omar Torrijos that if he accepted these huge loans, then his country's gross national product would just mushroom and pull his people out of poverty. And we produced these reports, which made sense from a mathematical econometric standpoint. And in fact, it often happened that with these loans, the GNP, the gross national product, did increase. But what also was true, and what Omar knew, and Jaime Roldos knew, and I was coming to know very strongly, was that even if the general economy increased, the poor people with these loans would get poorer. The rich would make all the money because most of the poor people weren't even tied into the gross national product. A lot of them didn't even make income. They were living off subsistence farming. They benefited nothing, but they were left holding the debt. And because of these huge debts, their country in the long term would not be able to provide them with health care, education, and other social services.
Talk about Congo.
Oh boy, the whole story of Africa and the Congo is such a devastating and sad one, and it's the hidden story really. We in the United States don't even talk about Africa. We don't think about Africa. Congo has something called coltan, which probably most of your listeners may not have even heard of, but every cell phone and laptop computer has coltan in it. And several million people in the last few years in the Congo have been killed over coltan because you and I and all of us in the G8 countries demand local, or at least we want to see our computers inexpensive and our cell phones inexpensive. And of course the companies that make these sell them on that basis. That, here, mine's $200 less than the other company. But in order to do that, these people in the Congo are being enslaved. The miners, the people mining coltan, are being killed. There's these vast wars going on to provide us with cheap coltan. And I have to say, if we want to live in a safe world, we must be willing, and in fact, we must demand that we pay higher prices for things like laptop computers and cell phones, and that a good share of that money go back to the people who are mining the coltan. And that's true of oil. It's true of so many resources that we are not paying the true cost, and there's millions of people around the world suffering from that. Roughly 50,000 people die every single day from hunger-related diseases and curable diseases that they don't get the medicines for, simply because they're part of a system that demands that they put in long hours and they get very, very low pay so we can have things cheaper in this country. And Congo is an incredibly potent example of that.
You talk about the so-called defeats in Vietnam and Iraq and what they mean for corporations.
Yeah, well, you and I look at them as defeats, perhaps, and certainly anybody who lost a child or a sibling or a spouse in these countries look at them as disasters, as defeats. But the corporations made a huge amount of money off Vietnam, the military industry, the huge corporations, the construction companies, and of course they're doing it in a very, very big way in Iraq. So the corporatocracy, the people that in fact are insisting that our young men and women continue to go to Iraq and fight, they're making a tremendous amount of money. These are not failures to them, they're successes.